Medha, briefly.
Yes, I mean, Arthashastra needs to be read within Dharmashastras, because Dharmashastras and Niti Shastras are two philosophical strands, and Arthashastra being a part of Niti Shastra needs to be interpreted within the larger Dharmashastras. Also, the conflict between the desirable and the feasible. You know, Arthashastra is a treatise of state and statecraft. So the idea of state really takes the idea of statecraft forward, and therefore the Saptanga theory, which Kautilya talks about in the 7 elements of the state, are really crucial to understanding Kautilya's Mandala theory also. And just to make a very important point here is the whole the comparison of Arthashastra with political realism. I really do see it a bit misplaced, because I mean, of course, Kautilya talks about Matsinai, that's true, but at the same time, political realism, the departure for political realism to start to understand state behavior is the anarchical environment. Whereas for Kautilya, on the other hand, it is the strength, the capacity of the state. And there is where I think what we really need to focus on.
So we need a strong state, both to protect the people and protect the interests of the collective in a complex international environment. But Vishwanathan, I mean, I think this tension, I mean, I think between moral politics and real politics.
See, actually, Arthashastra fits in very well with the Indian philosophy. That Hindu philosophy said that there are 4 aims in life: dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. So it fits in well with the thing that you have to have material gains, and you have to have a state which is run well. And all that Kautilya said was that if the king has to run his country well and protect his people, he has to take care of his relations with outside. And the cynical aspect of Arthashastra comes in only in his relations to the opponents or his adversaries. And if you have to deal with your adversaries in a tough way just to protect your people, I think there is nothing immoral about it.
That brings me to, I mean, I think you've been a diplomat, and Kautilya talks about different stratagems of diplomatic policy, as well as different tactics of using various instruments for promoting the interests of a state. So some of them are called the upayas. There is the so-called Shadgunya, where the 6 broad features of diplomacy. Could you just tell us very briefly what Kautilya's essence of his work on these themes?
See, in Arthashastra's discussion on foreign policy, the most interesting aspect are the strategies and the tactics. Actually, these words are taken from English. They don't literally translate. The Sanskrit ones don't literally translate as strategies and tactics. First were the Sadgunyas, which were the 6 policies that he followed. Now, how to deal with your adversaries? You can't deal with your adversaries all in one kind of an algorithm. It depends on the relative strength of the adversary. So Kautilya identified 6 ways of dealing with that, and this fits in with what Medha said of the mandalas, of the circle of kings, how you do with that. And he had, I'll just briefly run through all the 6. The first was Sandhi, that is to make a treaty.
Peace.
And it's a policy of peace. The second is Vigraha, which is a policy of hostility. The third is Asana, which is a policy of no action or wait and watch. The fourth is Yana, which is actually taking a preemptive action against, that is expediting your marching on the enemy. Then there is Samshraya, which is seeking shelter with an ally. And finally, it is Deidibhava, which is both having an alliance and attacking a person. It's
Dual
almost
policy.
forming an alliance against a third party. And all these policies had to be followed depending on the relative strength. Now, to pursue these policies, Kautilya also had 4 upayas, which can be seen in broad terms as tactics. That is, what are the obstacles to following a particular policy, and how do you overcome those obstacles? So he identified 4 upayas, which are quite famous. It's a household name. It is Samadana and Ved and Dand. And the first 2 are used actually against weak opponents, and the second 2 are used against the stronger opponents.
Ambassador Vishwanathan talked about diplomacy, but Kautilya also talks about warfare, I mean, different forms of warfare. Could you just tell us very briefly on the different types of warfare and methods he talks about?
Well, you can identify 3 types of victory. That's one of the easier things to do in the Arthashastra. There is Dharma Vijaya, and there is Asura Vijaya, and there is Lobha Vijaya.
So these are very similar. Dharma Vijaya is like saying just war. Just war. Yeah, it's very
Asura
similar.
Vijaya you can translate into strategy of annihilation or conquest, outright conquest. And then Lobha Vijaya is war made for profit, with that as a motive. So you have equivalents. These are, I think, the great thing about the Arthashastra is that it kind of reflects even contemporary reality. Life has not really changed that much, or statecraft has not really changed that much. So in that sense, I think we can talk in terms of these total war, limited war, war for profit, war for honor, war for
concealed warfare as well as covert warfare as well as open
Kutta
warfare.
Yuddha and
I want to ask you, I mean, you teach theory of international relations. I mean, you know, this whole, when we think of Kautilya, we think about mandala theory. Could you just tell us briefly to our viewers, I mean, what is this Rajamandala and what is this mandala theory? Very briefly, you can tell us.
Well, Rajamandala basically talks about 12 actors, but I think that's just symbolic. Broadly, they would be grouped into 5. The first is the conqueror, the dominant power, which is also known as the Vijigishu. The second is the ally, the allies which you have, it's a group of allies. The third is the enemy. The fourth is the middle king, you know, who is stronger than both the aspirant power and the belligerent power. And the fifth is the neutral power, who is not anywhere near the borders but is situated far away and is equally strong to take the middle power, the aspirant power and the belligerent power. Now, having said these group of actors, I think Kautilya is very, you know, he gives a very detailed analysis as to knowing the motivation and the intentions of the neighboring allies and the enemies. For instance, he says definitely geography is one of the parameters of defining who an enemy and an ally is, but I think Kautilya goes beyond this and he talks about the intention. So you need to know the motivation of the neighboring state. So if the motivation is hostile, then definitely that falls into the enemy group. And at the same time, if the state is very proximate to all the 7 prakritis of the state, and there the strength of the state really matters, there is also where you need to be wary about the neighboring state. So the motivation and the intention needs to be gauged through this, and then, you know, based on these parameters, then it's grouped into a group of allies and a group of enemies.
I think, you know, from what we've heard, I mean, or from all of you, I mean, clearly, I think many of the concepts we are used to because of our Western literature on alliances, on you know, how to play complex politics of balance of power. All these are fairly deeply rooted in Kautilya's treatise. I mean, in a sense, this is not different, you know, fundamentally from the classical Western thought. And so, and also he argues not from a religious basis, but on first principles of statecraft. Now, given all this, now, how do you think of his relevance today? So today, India faces many challenges. As Kalyan said, look, India is emerging as a major power. So how do you think, given your experience as a diplomat, use the knowledge of Kautilya today to strengthen ourselves, to build policies that secure the interests of Indian people?
See, what Kautilya articulated, more than 2000 years ago, is actually being articulated today in other terms, like Medha mentioned about the intention and all. Today we talk of threat, and the classic definition of threat from another, it has to have 2 elements. One is the intention and the other is a capability, and that's what Kautilya talked about. And depending on the intention and capability and the threat, how do you deal with that? So how do you apply Kautilya in today's circumstance? That was your question. There I would go a little further. Kautilya's Arthashastra is like I don't know.
We're running out of time, so we'll have to
it's like a software. You have to have specific applications for that. So for that, there has to be a thorough study of Kautilya, and we have to take gist of that and make applications for relevant situations.
Both of you, very briefly,
Okay,
will we use more of Kautilya? We're really running out of time.
Since we have very less time, I mean, you know, what I would really like to say is that Kautilya's Rajamandala, and that's very important, starts with the Saptanga theory, the 7 elements of the state, and ends with the Saptanga theory.
Is it relevant to today?
It is, in terms of alliance building and coalition building.
Yeah, thanks. What about you, Quinn?
You look at what Kautilya says about intelligence, for instance, and compare it with a modern text written in the 50s by Sherman Kent of the OSS. About intelligence analysis, it's largely the same. Now, I think what we need to do as scholars, of course, is to take those prescriptions in the Kautilya and link it up with the modern discourse on international relations. That is the way to go forward.
So I just wanted to thank you. I think we've had a very good discussion, and I hope the study of Kautilya will evolve further in the coming years. And I'm afraid we'll have to bring it to a close. And I think the important thing I think we've come out from our discussion today is that as India becomes a major power, and I think we need to develop our own vocabulary, our own inherited knowledge to be able to integrate that into the making of India's foreign policy, and to leverage our traditional conventional wisdom we've tended to ignore all these years into more practical, utilizable way that India has to deal with, as I said, a much more complex world that India challenges today. It faces in diplomacy, defense and strategy, all the themes of this program called Wide Angle. Thank you very much for joining us today, and goodbye until the next episode, which takes place on Friday. Thank you very much for joining us.